You're listening to Procurement 6, the weekly podcast from the team at Art of Procurement that summarizes this week in procurement in just 6 short segments.
Hi there, I'm Helen Mackenzie and today is Friday, February the 9th, 2024.
6.
I was delighted to play host to Anvil Analytical's Richard Brown on a recent edition of AOP Introducing. That's our video series where we dig into an organisation's origin story and discover how they solve unique challenges before providing insight on how you can take action. Anvil Analytical tackles complex and recurring issues within strategic sourcing and supplier management. During the session, Richard told me that using Anvil to gain a better view of data has meant that procurement can actually see the difference, period by period, month by month, quarter versus quarter. And that's been really powerful. Want to find out more? Check out the full conversation between me and Richard using the link to the AOP Introducing session in the show notes.
5.
In this week's Art of Procurement podcast episode, Philip Idson spoke to Adam Hunt, Global SVP Procurement and Subcontracting at Excite, about the most important issues driving the conversation around ESG today. In the extract I've chosen for you, Phil and Adam discuss how procurement can work with suppliers to get the data they need for better benchmarking, goal setting and performance tracking for ESG. Let's take a listen.
As you're kind of setting out on this journey, where do you get the data from to help you, your baseline where you are today so you can measure progress against that?
Good question. We drive a lot of that from our supply chain, right? Mm-hmm. So our suppliers having to be partners in this and having to join us on this journey is really, our suppliers have a significant impact on our ESG performance, right? We encourage them to adapt sustainable practices. We encourage them to follow and collaborate with our supplier code of conduct, our audits. All of it is a collaborative effort, right? We'll take on certain initiatives like supplier training and capacity building where we can in order to help them improve. But really a lot of our data is pulled from our supply chain and our projects on how we execute as our baseline of ESG performance, really.
So has your relationship with suppliers changed, or does it need to evolve so that you can involve them? So basically you can have the trusted relationship where they can share their data with you. You can be confident in that data, and there's more of an exchange of information than, perhaps a traditional buyer and seller relationship.
Yeah. It is becoming more and more of a relationship industry because, a lot of this ESG data is about trusting each other, complying, auditing, coming around and building on it together, right? Improvement and how can we support them, but how also can they ensure that they're supporting our initiatives and our goals of our clients or the governments. And funny enough, a lot of our suppliers will have to comply with a lot of the same legislation and regulations we're going to have to anyways, right? But it's how can we leverage each other to get the best out of it and to simplify, right? Because let's be honest, you could send out a pre-qual with thousands of questions and that's not going to benefit anybody, right? They have to be strategic. They have to be, yes or no for the most part, or a number driven one. It can't be a lot of opinion there, right? So, those relationships help when you have those phone calls with the, CPOs of your suppliers or the CFOs and their sales teams, and say, hey, how do we get on this journey together? You need to support me in building up this data. And if you don't, how can I help you get there?
ESG is a collaboration, a partnership between procurement and suppliers. But as Adam points out, while we might all know that in theory, in practice it can get lost when we're focused on hitting the numbers. So, we need to remember strong supplier relationships that are based on trust and open communication will lead to better ESG outcomes. To listen to the full episode, go to artofprocurement.com/podcast or search for Art of Procurement and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, or click on the link in today's show notes.
4.
On January the 5th, Alaska Airlines Flight 1282 left Portland, Oregon en route to California. Just minutes into the flight, the Boeing 737 MAX 9 lost a door plug, creating a gaping hole in the side of the aircraft. Fortunately, all 171 passengers and 6 crew members were safe, largely because the plane had only reached 16,000 feet, minimising the amount of cabin decompression that took place. It also helped that no one was sitting in front of the plug, which was put in place to cover a spot that otherwise would have been an extra emergency exit. Once the shock had worn off, the questions began. How did this happen? Whose fault was it? And how can we prevent it from happening again? The answer to all 3 questions involves the supply chain, one specific supplier, and a model of outsourcing that is common in the aerospace industry. In this week's episode of the Art of Supply podcast, Kelly Barner considers how the structure of the aircraft manufacturing supply chain contributed directly to the highly publicised failure on board the aircraft. Now, even though it's a great episode, I'm grateful I didn't listen to it before I boarded my plane from Stornoway to Glasgow on Wednesday this week. Check out the episode using the link in the show notes.
This is Procurement 6 from Art of Procurement. To get notified every time an episode is published, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe. 3.
Now, I'm a former accountant and even I wonder what could possibly be more complicated than tax accounting. Well, the answer could be managing your detailed shipping costs and the carrier logic that drives them. The details change every year and the high-level information released to the media rarely reflects the nuanced information that appears on the shipping invoices. In this week's episode of the Sourcing Hero podcast, Kelly Barner welcomes Nick DiNatale, founder and CEO of ShipPlug. Nick talks about the many things shippers may not know that may be costing them in multiple ways. If you want to find out more, make sure you listen into the episode using the link in the show notes.
2.
Returning to the topic of ESG, I was delighted when Steve Shipley, one of the founders of a new ESG-focused digital publication, Citizen Zero, connected with me on LinkedIn last week. The beautifully presented launch edition of the magazine includes a range of articles on sustainable business and culture. So there's lots of ideas to stimulate the creative juices of procurement and supply folks everywhere. And that's why I thought I would share it with you today. Check out the link in the show notes to the magazine to find out more.
1.
Not long now to digital outcomes. It's less than a month away and the agenda is looking great. From AI to cyber to a forward look to 2030, there's plenty of interesting sessions in the lineup. And I'll be hosting a special session of AOP Introducing during the event too. So make sure you sign up to join us at Digital Outcomes using the link in the show notes or at artofprocurement.com/calendar.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back next Friday at 6 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time. If you've enjoyed this pod, help us grow and tell your peers to search for Procurement 6 wherever they get their podcasts.